Welcome to our session today, which touches on the customer experience with Humio. We're going to talk about what it's like to become a customer of Humio, the impacts it has on your business, and what it's like to maintain it ongoing, real live with a customer from HPE. Lobo joins us. My name is Joe Mattioli. I've been with CrowdStrike for 5.5 years. I joined CrowdStrike to build out the global commercial sales team. And having done that, wanted to be part of CrowdStrike's future. And what better way to do that than joining Humio, a groundbreaking technology that is changing the way that people take in, process, and make decisions based on data. So with that, Ali, thanks for joining us today. You've been a customer with us for 2.5 years. Can you just give the group a little bit of a background on your journey at HP and how you got into the role that you're in today?
Hey, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. Allwyn, Lobo, Ollie here from HPE, responsible for cloud infrastructure, engineering, and operations. Build a team with Aruba and then HPE to lead the infrastructure engineering across cloud agnostically across the 3 major cloud providers, as well as then operated at scale. I've been had an interesting journey with Humio, and hopefully we'll discuss this as part of my conversation with Joe. Worked with them very early on in their early days as a startup, so I'm looking forward to this conversation as well as sharing my experiences with Humio and how we've taken it from where it was to where it is today and things like that. So thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Ollie. So we're going to run through Ollie's experience, and then we're going to talk about some of the opportunities that you have with Humio throughout this conference, but also when you go back to work in terms of ways that you can really try Humio out and utilize it. So Ollie, I wanted to start this chat by really giving the audience an understanding of what your journey was like. How did you get involved with Humio in the first place? How did you find it? Most organizations have a logging solution they're using today. How did Humio even pop up on your radar?
Yeah, back in 2016, 17, we were using the ELK stack, and we, the Elasticsearch with the Logstash as well as Kibana, and it worked well initially. And then after about a year or so, it started that we started having gaps in logs coming out, things of that nature. And so we then went in-house and retooled some of Kibana to get it right. And we did that, and that worked for another 18 months. At that point, we were scaling and bursting through the seams. We were going cloud agnostically across all the cloud providers, across the 7 world regions. And at some point, ELK just wouldn't scale for us. So we had to go back and look in the market. And we did a side-by-side run of various providers, and we'll talk to that again. And then we found Humio just through a normal search, and no contact, nobody introduced us, things like that. So it was an interesting journey, and that's how we found Humio. We found it through just a search.
And like, what prompted that move off of Elk? What was the experience that you were having with it, and what caused you to really initiate that search in the first place?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of open source, and big time at HPE, we, various places we use open source a lot. And when at some point we couldn't scale, the scale problem and the lack of the ability to not have all those logs being available to the dev and QA team engineers to make sure that things are working well, not able to retain those logs for the period of time we want to, not able to bring logs from places we want to, whether it was infrastructure, whether it was application logs, things like that. At some point we decided, look, this is not going to work. If we're going to have to be able to run this at scale, we have to find a solution that we can focus on, and logging is not a core competency of ours. So we went to the market to look for something, and that's how we found Humio.
That's great. I appreciate that. And when you looked at alternatives because of scale and performance and just the sheer volume of logs you wanted to take in but couldn't, did you evaluate other solutions in that process?
Yes, we did. We did a couple other solutions, and we looked at your competitors. We've looked at Datadog and a couple other competitors of yours at that time. Humio was a brand new startup out of Denmark Engineering, based in San Francisco. Met with Geeta and Mortem, and then from there, we just did a side-by-side POC. The value we got and the ability to run it in the modes we wanted to made it an absolutely fabulous way to take this forward. And at that point, we were running, I believe, about 30 terabytes a day. And today, I just checked last night, actually, we're running about 74 terabytes a day. And we couldn't sustain even 10. And then at 30, we were bursting. Today we are doing 74 and no issues. So we'll talk about other support things that we need, but this was a good experience for us.
And when you say you're bursting at 30 terabytes, I mean, does that manifest in the way of slow search times, or what does that do to the day-to-day for your developer team?
Yeah, it's a combination of factors, right? As a developer, I want to make sure that every piece of logging information that I need is available all the time. I want to make sure that I see my fatal errors. I need to be able to see alerts if there are any. I need to be able to retain my logs so I can scroll back the window and take a look at what happened 7 days ago, 14 days ago, or a month ago. And those gaps really forced us in this direction. And apart from that, even things like simple things like the user interface and making sure it's easily navigatable. Kibana has a fabulous interface, and there was resistance at some point with changing. But I'll talk through that as we go through this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great segue in terms of the migration process. So a lot of people out there are going to be a little bit anxious about moving off of something that's perhaps more established or that they have a longer runway with. And I'm sure many of your developers experience that same level of angst. So what was that like, and how did you go over the hump?
Sure. As engineers, we all resist change at some point, and as human beings, we do too. So engineers are more likely to do that. But we ran through some demos. We ran through a POC. We ran through a test cycle with a small engineering team. At some point, the teams really started getting to it, and once they got a hang of it, and they've seen how easy it was to set up their new alerts and things like that. One of the features that really put us over the hump was and got everybody behind it was the live tailing feature. One of the problems that as engineers we all have, the tail minus half. I want to be able to see my logs in real time, and make sure that I can see them as it's happening. And whether they're coming from Kubernetes pods, they're coming from the infrastructure, they're coming from the application, I want to be able to see it live versus a delay. And the feature that Humio has for live tailing really helped push everybody in that, because we couldn't get that done through the ELK stack. So that really helped.
So that brings up another question, in that when you start to see not only the scale, you go from taking in 10 terabytes with Elk to 70, 80 terabytes with Humio. You're clearly taking in a lot more data than you're used to, perhaps far more than you even planned to. You mentioned you migrated from 10, you were struggling with 10, you moved to Humio with 30, and now you're at 70. So is that process going from 30 to 70, did Humio open up new use cases in various departments that allowed you to realize logging where you really didn't explore it before?
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to put logs out from CloudTrail, CloudWatch, things like that, which we were not tracking. We were not able to do retainment for a long period of time. We were missing some of the alerts that we wanted to get done. Some of the groups, newer groups that want to look at it, was actually on an on-prem use case, where we take these logs on-prem and then we find a way to bring them back to the cloud to analyze things like that. Of course, the other obvious one was the security side, which we're not using Humio there at the moment, but that's a use case. And then for some of the IT workloads that the IT team uses. So those are some of the newer workloads we are looking at, although we haven't gone there, but those are in the works.
Yeah, it tends to be a common experience with other customers, in that it's a matter of time before the initial organization that brought Humio in is able to really cross into other organizations and provide value. uh, through either a shared service or by offering Humio as a technology that they can set up on their own to achieve greater scale, greater performance, and greater flexibility. And one of the things that developers seem to need is that flexibility. So when you think about the access they had pre-Humio and the access they have today, what does that picture look like?
So one of the principles that we run under is to be able to provide observability to every engineer for all their workloads in the cloud. And one of the tools that we have is the logging mechanism. And Humio provides us that flexibility to bring that piece of observability that is wrapped around all the applications, which we couldn't do previously. So as an engineer, if you want to be able to see what's going on in production without actually having your physical fingers in production, Humio brought that for us and gave us that wraparound 360 logging. All logs go through there. Of course, we do use Prometheus and Grafana for other purposes, but at least for the application logs, the CrowdTrail, CloudWatch, those are coming through Humio. And I think that's where the engineers enjoy that, and that makes it a lot easier for the teams that are operating that to make that available to all of engineers, all the engineers in production with all their applications.
So it certainly made your developers and engineers happier, it sounds like. But would you say it's also saved them a significant amount of time in, getting releases out more quickly and being more confident in the code that they write?
Thank you for bringing up the cost angle, Joe, here. So developers had a challenge previously where not all application logs were available only because of the resource and not so much the resource, but the scale constraints that we had with the ELK. That reduced the friction as well as the time it took developers to put releases out. So yes, it brought down the cost on the release side. And also on the time it took to do the releases, but also therefore time to market. And therefore on the business side, the costs we were able to turn around releases faster. The other side of the cost we were saving was because of the time it took the SRE team or the automation team to manage the ELK stack in production or on dev and QA. And finally, the cost of actually ownership of Humio was very, very, very interesting for us, partly because it was a startup and you were able to negotiate a very good, favorable deal with Humio, which we've locked in for the next 3 years. So we should be in good shape there on the budget side. So
it pays to be early, that's for sure. And there was another component of that, because even if you had paid the same amount as you were paying before, obviously you're an open source, so there were really no costs before. But what was the savings like on the infrastructure side? How many nodes were you using in a like configuration with ELK versus Humio?
I know the ELK numbers really well. I can tell you that. So we used to be at about 10 nodes and stuff in our shared QA environment for all the engineers, at 10 nodes with the ELK stack. We bumped that up to about 35 nodes to just sustain what we needed to do. When we went back to Humio, so I know the ELK numbers really well because they were a pain, right? I mean, we were seeing the pain, everybody was complaining, we were seeing the costs, etc. So to some point we did reduce it. I don't have the exact number we went that down to. I know the numbers went down when we went to went from ELK to Humio, but I don't have that number in front of me. But I know for a fact that the cost reduced by about a third.
Yeah. Typically we see folks needing to dedicate anywhere from 10% to 25% as much infrastructure as they used prior, depending on what kind of logs they're taking in. And that infrastructure leverage, provides a ton of cost, but also, if you look at it from a standpoint of, hey, you want to just use the like for like infrastructure, now all of a sudden you're able to do 3-4 times as much, sometimes 5 times as much, without having to buy any additional infrastructure. So you can go from a 30 terabyte to a 70 terabyte without needing to, take in a bunch of servers. And, as in today's day and age with the compute shortage, there's it's hard to get servers and it's hard to get, advanced computing resources in place in a timely fashion. So Do you find any leverage there, or is that attractive to you from a planning perspective?
So fortunately, 95, 99% of the workloads are running on the three large public cloud providers. So we don't have to go purchase hardware from that side. So we don't have that challenge of waiting for compute and storage to arrive at various places to then hook them up into racks. So, but we do have the ability to deploy very quickly, and we deploy in two models. And I think, Joe, you and I can discuss that on how the multiple models we deploy. And Humio has made that really easy for us to deploy in these various models across the various regions, across the various cloud providers and things like that.
That's great. And Ali, I guess when you're thinking about, like, there's at some point in the buying process when you're looking at Humio, because Humio is fairly unique in the scale it can provide and the cost savings it can provide, the infrastructure leverage it can provide. When you thought about the scale that Humio claimed to deliver, how did you really get to a point to where you believed that it could deliver what the claims were?
Right. So one of the things that we did and we do really well is to not take on a product until we've actually tested it for scale. So even before we took on Humio back in 2018, we tested it and did a full POC side-by-side run. And only once we knew that it was going to scale for us, and we put it side-by-side with the ELK, we put it side-by-side with Dog and everybody else, and we ran them all at scale. And a combination of factors, whether it was technical, whether it was cost, et cetera, narrowed it down to Humio, and we're able to take that forward. So that, we did not purchase or go with Humio even before we tested for scale. So scale worked beautifully. It continues to work beautifully, and we've had a great experience as far as scale is concerned. No ingest problems, 20% increased compression ratio and things like that. So all good stuff so far. Yeah.
I just got word this week that another customer had successfully completed stress testing on 1.5 petabytes a day. So I think you'll be cleared for some time into the future. And we're happy to work with you and partner with you through that as you go to different departments and continue to take on new data sources. Ali, thank you so much for being a part of this and really just helping other people understand the value of Humio in terms of not just log management, but also being able to stream live events and take in more data, retain it for longer at scale. Your experience is, I believe, very valuable for both our internal people and for all of our customers and prospective customers out there. So thank you so much for your time and your partnership. And we look forward to doing so much more with you and your team at HP.
Hey, thanks for the conversation, Joe. Appreciate the fun conversation and the robust dialogue. All the very best.
So now if you want to engage with Humio, there's a few ways you can do that. One, through our Nest. And in the Nest, we've created and launched a community that allows you to engage with other people who are industry experts and analysts in log management to really hear what's going on, what's the latest and greatest, not just with log management, but with really real-time event streaming at scale. And so really excited about that, because on that Nest, you can download for yourself your own cloud version of Humio and use it for your business, use it for your personal needs. For as much as 16 gigabytes a day, you can retain data for 7 days, and it's free. So you get to use it, but also within the interface, you get access to our marketplace, in which you can see all the different packages and integrations we've created. There's probably 30 plus today, with many more in the pipeline to come. And we'd love your feedback on other things that you'd like us to integrate with as we look to build an ecosystem around Humio. So we invite you to come try it, just like Ali did, and see how it works at scale, see the performance and the flexibility and the speed that you can get with being able to take in much more data than you're used to before. So with that, thank you so much for joining us for this session. And we'll hope to be able to have a conversation with you as well.